Hey historians, it's Mrs. Tyler. Today we are going to do Unit 3, Civil War and Reconstruction, Note 7. We're specifically talking about the era of Reconstruction today. These are the two pages in our notes packet that we will complete, pages 17 and 18. 5 days after General Lee surrendered to General Grant and the war officially ended at Appomattox Courthouse, President Abraham Lincoln was shot and killed by a Southern sympathizer named John Wilkes Booth. The president was assassinated while attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. The nation was already in ruins from a long, violent civil war and was now mourning the death of the president, that they would never have the chance to know how Lincoln planned on rebuilding a war-torn country. So in your notes packet, please define assassinate. April 14th, 1865, 5 days after the war ended, John Wilkes Booth shot and killed President Lincoln. Vice President Andrew Johnson became president after Lincoln's death in April of 1865. President Johnson felt it was the job of the president to carry out the work of Reconstruction to reunite the United States and rebuild the South after the Civil War. Johnson was a Southerner from Tennessee, and he had a pretty racist streak. His idea of Reconstruction was aimed at getting white Southern farmers back in business. He was less concerned about the millions of blacks who had few job skills and education and now needed jobs. So Andrew Johnson became president when Lincoln was assassinated. He began the era called Presidential Reconstruction. President Johnson's Reconstruction Plan was announced in May of 1865. Former Confederate states needed to rejoin the Union, but they had to complete the following things. Number one, they had to write a new state constitution, one that did not include slavery. 2, they had to elect new state governments, so everyone lost their position that they had been elected to, and they had to hold all new elections. They had to repeal their Act of Recession. Every single one of the 11 states that had seceded had issued a formal declaration of secession passed by their state Congress, and they had to repeal that. They also had to pay off their own war debts. The Union was like, we've got our own war debts to pay for. You need to make sure that all of your soldiers are paid for their service and all of the businesses that you bought supplies and things from were paid off and all of that kind of stuff, because the Union was like, we're not going to cover your costs. You guys kind of started this war and you lost. It's up to you to pay off your debts. The last thing is that they also had to ratify an amendment to the Constitution, the United States Constitution, to abolish slavery. So all former Confederate states had accomplished this by the fall of 1865, and the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution that officially banned slavery in every part of the United States was ratified December of 1865. So once this happened, President Johnson's pretty proud of himself. He thinks that Reconstruction is all done. So in our notes, let's take a look at that 13th Amendment. It's a change to the Constitution. It officially banned slavery in the United States, and it was ratified December of 1865. We also have to put this on the Unit 3 timeline on page 2 in our notes. Congress disagreed with President Johnson. They felt that it wasn't the responsibility of the president, but rather it was the responsibility of Congress to carry out Reconstruction and make sure that the United States gets rebuilt. The Northern Republican congressmen felt Southern states needed strong measures in place to be sure that the new governments that they were electing in those former slave states were based on equality and not that they weren't just re-electing the same old racist pro-slavery leaders that they had before. President Johnson ignored Congress regarding Reconstruction. He carried out his own methods for rebuilding the nation. He and Congress did not get along for a very long time, and Congress went as far as holding impeachment hearings for the president. Remember that when a president is impeached, it is a hearing to look into whether or not he or she, or he so far, should be removed from office. Okay, so just because you're impeached does not mean that you are removed from office. In fact, President Johnson escaped removal from office by just one Senate vote. All right, Reconstruction is the time when the South was rebuilt and brought back into the Union. While the governments argued over how to implement Reconstruction, the Southerners they couldn't wait for the president and Congress to get their acts together. They were already working to rebuild their new lives. One of the first main problems is newly freed slaves had not been allowed for the most part to get an education. It was in most of those southern states illegal to teach. Your slaves had to read and write. So newly freed slaves don't have the education and job training for high-paying jobs. Plus, many of the business owners are pretty bitter and probably slightly racist and are probably not going to be hiring Black people or former slaves to work. So former slave owners also had the issue where they needed workers for their farms. Their land, they had way too much land to farm on their own. But because of the economic collapse of the South because of the war, it meant that they had very little money to pay workers. The solution, and I use quotations because it's looks a whole lot like what we just had, that formed out of these circumstances is known as sharecropping. Poor whites who couldn't afford their own land and former slaves would rent land from plantation owners to farm. Okay, so they would pay plantation owners rent to live and work on the land, which I think is kind of interesting because during slavery, they were kept as the slaves had been kept as slaves, of course, and property, but they didn't have to pay to live there, and they didn't have to pay to work that land. Okay, two main problems existed with sharecropping. Former slaves were always in debt to the landowners, and they were not getting an education to improve their circumstances. Frederick Douglass described the problems that were faced by former slaves. Former slaves were called freedmen. After the 13th Amendment, once slavery ended, under slavery, slave owners provided everything the slaves needed: housing, food, clothing. They were all part of owning slaves. Once slavery ended, former slaves were left with no way to provide for their basic needs. In response, Congress established what we call the Freedmen's Bureau, an agency that was set up to provide short-term help to former slaves with getting access to food and medical care. They also helped arrange for wages and even helped distribute some land to get former slaves on their feet. The longest lasting impact, though, of the Freedmen's Bureau was with education. They opened schools to teach thousands of former slaves, young and old. There's the Freedmen's Bureau, provided short-term aid in food and medical care and long-term help and education for former slaves. Of course, it wasn't surprising when those newly elected governments in the former Confederate states began to look pretty much like the exact racist, pro-slavery old governments run by the same people who led the South before the war. Once they were back in office, these governments began to pass legislations to restrict and control former slaves. They passed laws called Black Codes, meant to limit the civil rights and freedoms of African Americans. These laws denied former slaves voting rights. They could not serve on juries. Blacks who were unemployed could be arrested and sent to forced work for plantation owners, which is pretty much like slavery. Black codes limited blacks to low-paying jobs. States also passed laws requiring segregation of blacks and whites in public places. Get these two definitions written down. Black codes are laws passed in former Confederate states to limit rights and freedoms of African Americans. And segregation is legalized separation of people in public places based on race and skin color. Republicans in Congress were alarmed at the return of power to former Southern leaders. The issue remained that the Supreme Court had ruled that blacks were not citizens in the Dred Scott decision less than a decade earlier. Remember, this is our buddy Dred Scott. We had talked about him in 6th grade and recently at the beginning of Unit 3. The Supreme Court had ruled that Dred Scott could not sue for his freedom because he was black. So, and they said that blacks are not citizens, they're property. So we needed to make a change to the Constitution. Congress passed what we call the Civil Rights Act of 1866 to declare freedmen to be full citizens with the same rights as civil rights as whites. President Johnson didn't like the law, so he vetoed it. But an angry Congress overrode his veto. This is an example of the checks and balances that we talked about way back in Unit 1. Congress took civil rights even further by ratifying the 14th Amendment. This amendment granted citizenship to all people born or naturalized in the United States and guaranteed equal protection of the laws. This meant that Southern states had to recognize former slaves as citizens and could not pass laws to treat them differently. That doesn't mean that they didn't try, though. So on our page for civil rights, we're going to define it as rights guaranteed by the Constitution to citizens, especially equal treatment under the law. On our timeline of amendments, we're going to fill in 14th Amendment is Civil Rights Amendment. It granted citizenship to former slaves and equal protection of the law. In early 1867, Congress overrode President Johnson's veto and established what we call Military Reconstruction Act. This plan divided the South into districts. in each district that you see here on the map was assigned a military general, and the military generals were given support by federal troops. And basically it was that the United States Army was babysitting these military districts throughout the South and forcing them to comply with the new terms, with the new rules. Okay, the new Southern governments were no longer allowed to look like those old Confederate governments. The only Southerners that could vote were ones that were loyal to the Union. Okay, the military helped millions of former slaves register to vote, which is a good thing, but I also have a feeling that this right here, where the only people who agreed with the Union were going to be allowed to vote, this is going to come back, I think, really to bite the U.S. in the butt, I think. I think it's going to make many of those Southerners much more angry and bitter because now their voices are silenced. If they don't agree with the U.S. government, then they don't get to vote. And I feel like that's probably a bad idea. Even though the intention was to make sure that those old Southern governments are no longer those racist old Confederate governments, and that's a good plan, but the way that they carry it out is really going to only make many of those Southerners much more bitter and upset. Many Southerners felt stripped of their rights as citizens, and they looked for ways to restrict former slaves even further. One of these ways is by forming this organization called the Ku Klux Klan. Democrats tried to lure African Americans away from voting for Republicans. When that didn't work, they tried to pass laws from keeping former slaves from being able to vote. In areas across the South, whites formed secret organizations to try and intimidate blacks and keep former slaves politically powerless. The most infamous of these secret societies was the Ku Klux Klan. Keeping their identities a secret by dressing in long-hooded white robes, the Klansmen, armed with guns and swords, worked to intimidate and threaten black voters. They would threaten, beat, tar and feather, and even murder black people who did not heed their warnings. Oops. So in our notes, we're going to fill in the racist secret society that used violence and intimidation to try and keep former slaves powerless. African Americans were new voters in the election of 1868. Poor Southerners viewed the Democratic Party as a party of wealthy planters. Both of these groups of Southern voters supported the Republican Party. So new black voters and poor Southern white voters are looking at the Democratic Party as the party of the wealthy planting, like landowners and planters, plantation owners. So those poor whites and former slaves, when they go to vote, they're going to be supporting the Republican Party. The wealthy Southerners viewed any white person who would support the Republican Party as a traitor. The military presence in the South had helped millions of former slaves register to vote. In response, black candidates were elected to new Republican-led state governments. We get some of our very first African-American state and U.S. Senators and congressmen during this era. In the election of 1868, these new Southerner voters helped elect Republican candidate Ulysses S. Grant. Grant supported Reconstruction, and he promised to protect the rights of African Americans. His opponent was Horatio Seymour, and he had promised to end Reconstruction and return power to those traditional white Democrat leaders in the South. So it was very much a divided by class, divided by race. There was this kind of this pressure by the wealthy white Southerners that if you're white, you must be voting Democrat, otherwise you're a traitor, and you can't possibly support the things that are important to white people, which is really unfortunate because nobody should be told who they should vote for based on their skin color. President Grant encouraged Congress to pass the 15th Amendment. This change to the Constitution would make it illegal or unlawful to try and deny any person their right to vote based on their race, skin color, or former slave status. The 15th Amendment was ratified in 1869, and abolitionists felt that they had accomplished their goals. However, even with this constitutional amendment in place, Southern states would find ways to resist and tried to make it difficult for former slaves to vote. So in some of the Southern states, they would require all citizens, no matter what their color, black and white, to pay what we call a poll tax in order to vote. This actually was meant very purposely to keep poor people who tended to vote for Republicans and African Americans who were limited in the kinds of job opportunities that they had. It kept those people from being able to participate in elections, and therefore it was going to favor Democratic candidates that were supported by the wealthy white Southerners. Okay. The other states required citizens to pass literacy tests to prove that they were educated enough to vote. And they tried to explain that, well, this isn't racist because we require everyone to pass these literacy tests. But if you really looked at some of those tests, they were really